everyone, and welcome back to the Barely Bookish podcast. Today we are going to be talking about Kindred. Just to get off right off the bat, I did want to make some content warnings because this book is rather graphic. So I may honestly Google them, but the ones I can think of right off the top of my head, I would say probably graphic violence, self-harm, a lot of racism, and that's all I can think of off the top of my head. But please, take care of yourself. If there's anything you're worried about, I would say probably Google it first, just because I want to make sure that you all are protected and you kind of know what you're getting into. So, also, I do want to say that for these first couple recordings, I read through the beginning through the end of the fall chapter, which was about page 107. So in the next few recordings, there is going to be a lot of spoilers for those chapters, but I don't know anything besides that. So if you want to pause, read along with us, please be sure to read through the end of that. And then once it starts going chapter by chapter, I will announce that in the beginning. So that way you all know. But without further ado, let's get into the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Barely Bookish podcast. Today, we are talking about Kindred with a very good friend of mine, Candace.
Hi.
I am very excited to discuss this because I don't know. Everyone told me to watch Outlander, and then I found out Outlander is basically like a rip off this a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I was like, let's do the source material, which is always fun for me.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. I actually did some research. I read Kindred in college for the first time, and then I started a job at Borders, RIP. And while I was at Borders, I saw this. I guess there was a new book of the Outlander series out at the time that I was working there. And this woman came in and was like, "I need it now. Where is it? Is it on your shelves?" And I was like, "What is this book this lady cares so much about?" So I read the back of the first one and I was like, this sounds an awful lot like that other book that I read, Kindred.
Yeah.
That's weird. And I kind of just left it there. And I didn't really think about it again until the show came out, like the TV show. It definitely bears a strong resemblance. Obviously, Outlander, I think, is much more romantic in nature than Kindred, but the principles are very, very similar, suspiciously so, if you ask me.
Yeah, a little bit. It's like recently, I can't remember the two songs, but someone found out that Misery Business, someone was inspired by Misery Business. I think it was Misery Business, but they were like, hey, this sounds basically the same, to the point where Paramore. I don't know why when I said Paramore, my brain just saw Paramount, the thing, and my brain was like, that can't be correct.
Not too dissimilar, though.
But I guess Paramore actually went after them, so I have to find that article again.
Really?
Yeah, because TikTok kind of was like, listen, these are the same.
Yeah,
these
here's
are
the
same
truth.
song.
Well, yeah. So that actually did happen, I think a few years ago with Halo by Beyonce and Already Gone by Kelly Clarkson. And they have the same songwriter. So that's even worse. Ooh. Yeah. So Kelly Clarkson was like, dear man who wrote this song for me, you realize that you also wrote this same song for Beyonce and that I never stood a chance because she's Beyonce, right? Thanks a lot for that. I wasted a bunch of money on this. So I think if you try looking for Already Gone, you can still find it, but I don't think she likes performing it because she knows it's Halo.
Yeah. So let me just tell you, I don't read the back of books. I try not to. I did read a little bit of this one, so I kind of knew a little bit more than I usually do because you suggested this and I had never heard of it. So I was like, let me just see what this is about. So I was not prepared. I don't care that I read a little bit. It didn't spoil too much for me, which is perfect. But we start off the prologue, and this is the very first line, which we love a good, strong line.
Oh, yeah.
This is the first line of this book. I lost an arm on my last trip home, my left arm. And I was like, I'm sorry, ma'am. What?
Hold on. Yeah. Very strong way to start your story. I love that it not only kind of gives the reader an immediate understanding that this is going to
Mm-hmm.
be about suffering, that this is not going to be like a fairy tale by any means
Mm-hmm.
at all. Um, but it also talks about the fact that it's about loss. You know what I mean? It's not just about like, oh yeah, oh no, I got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
There's suffering. Like it's also about like loss. Like she lost her
Yeah.
arm. You know what I mean? That's different than I hurt myself or, that's so extreme.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you, I am happy to be reading this because the only other book I read in set in like this time period so far is I had the unfortunate experience to read Gone with the Wind.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, when they're like, oh yeah, actually we treat our slaves really well. I'm like, do you? No.
I think that that's the biggest thing for me too, because like even growing up in school, like I remember in ninth grade, in my American history class,
Mm-hmm.
we talked about slavery and the antebellum South and all that stuff. And my teacher at the time, my professor, was actually from the South. He had a big Southern accent and everything,
Mm-hmm.
and wore little bow ties. Um, Although I don't know why that's synonymous with the South. A good bow tie I love, but this guy was just
Mm-hmm.
very kind
We
of
know the vibe.
he was surly.
Yeah.
So I remember him talking about how, not all slaves were poorly treated. And I raised my hand
Mm.
and I was like, I'm pretty sure if you're not allowed to do whatever you want to do at any given point in the day, that's
Mm.
not really being treated well. I mean, within reason,
Yeah.
obviously, within reason. But like, if somebody owns you and can sell your family and you
Mm-hmm.
can't stay with your family and you can't protect yourself or your children and you fear for your welfare, it doesn't matter if the person feeds you and gives you a bed to lay on or a cot on the floor. Like that's not,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Compared to what? That's always my question.
Yeah.
Compared to what exactly,
Well, I have honestly talked about this a lot on my podcast, but I went to school where I didn't get American history.
Mm.
I only got European history.
Wow,
So I
really?
did have, yeah, it was the program I was in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did have a teacher that luckily kind of like took some time away from the curriculum and was like, hey, these are things that are important and you need to know about.
Mm-hmm.
So I got like a gist of things that happened,
Mm-hmm.
but like we didn't take time to actually talk about slavery, which I think is awful and terrible. But like she did take time to be like, hey, you know, the founding fathers are not good people.
Yeah.
First off, stop romanticizing the past.
Yeah.
Please take time to, learn your history outside of school.
Mm-hmm.
But, these are like highlight points of like American history. And then she's like, and now we have to go back to Europe because if I spend any more time on this, we won't be able to pass exams. And that's the shitty part is that like, everything is around the final exams at the end of the year
Yeah.
and nothing's about learning.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Traditional school is not great. What I know about slavery, well, what I knew about slavery as a young person, I largely got from
mm-hmm,
home. And when my
mm-hmm,
teacher said that in ninth grade, and I protested, he actually made me uh, prepare like a 10-page paper. Like I got punished for speaking up, and I had to write a 10-page paper with citations about
mm-hmm,
like where I'm getting my facts, because he was like, that's not true. He was like trying to tell these kids that like slavery wasn't a big deal. And, people say that they got beaten all the time, but like, would you throw an alarm clock that didn't work out the window, or would you try to fix it? And I'm like, right, but how would you try to fix an enslaved person that does not want to be enslaved? Like
mm-hmm.
they're going to fight with everything they've got. So what are you prepared to do to counter
Yeah.
that? Like that's pretty nefarious. So I remember having to kind of I had to make a presentation. I had to like teach a class, essentially, is what he challenged me to do. And I was prepared to do that because my mom
Mm-hmm.
was like, you need to know real American history. You're not going to learn this in school. She bought me tons of books. Whenever we had like a day off or it was Black History Month or whatever, my mom would have me write, like a book report about whatever it is
Mm-hmm.
that I had read, or choose a famous African American person, or a famous, I should say just a Black person, because some of them were not American,
Mm-hmm.
and write about that and learn about that so that I was well educated. And it made a big difference, because I think like there are a lot of people out there who don't realize the pressure and the toll that like race kind of has in America for people.
Yeah.
Even if they have Black friends and family, sometimes it's not
Mm-hmm.
obvious if they don't experience it with that person. Um,
Yeah.
so my parents always tried to make sure that I was, good at talking about race and good at articulating my feelings, because there are a lot of people who just don't know. It's not even that they dislike Black people. They just don't think that their life is that different from theirs. You know what I mean? To
Yeah.
recognize if there's a problem that needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can only get that from like an outsider perspective. But let me tell you, going to a very diverse high school and thinking, oh yeah, we don't have racism in high school, it can't be everywhere, and then going to a public college that was not very diverse, like it's diverse, but
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of the kids I went to in my like small group uh were not raised in the same type of school system that I was.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of a culture shock. I was like, oh no. Uh-oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Scary.
you don't know anything about the world. Okay.
Yeah, I was like, oh, weird. Okay, so this is something that still exists. That's terrifying to me.
Yeah.
That's a new realization that I have to have.
Yeah.
Hate that. Thanks.
I think part of the reason that this book also kind of really resonates with me is that, like, I come from a mixed race family. My mom is
Mm-hmm.
black and my dad is Italian. And then my
Mm-hmm.
partner is also white. So, being somebody who has existed kind of in between a lot in life,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what the main character does. She kind of exists in this world where she knows she's black and she knows that her partner is not. But,
Mm-hmm.
she tries to avoid interacting with it unless somebody kind of forces you to. And for
Yeah.
me, it's sometimes it's small, sometimes it's little, sometimes it's as simple as Jason and I are holding hands in a
Mm-hmm.
store. We walk up, I put the groceries on the or whatever it is that we're buying on the register to check out,
Mm-hmm.
and they act like they don't know that we're together, even though like we're obviously together.
Yeah.
Or and then sometimes it's big, like just a few weeks ago, actually, my partner's boss didn't believe him when he said that he had a black partner. He was like, "You? Are you kidding? You have blonde hair and blue
Mm-hmm.
eyes. Like, look at yourself." I don't know. I refuse to believe that. No, no, no. Why are you making jokes like that? And it's
I
like,
also,
why would that be a joke?
yeah. I feel like there's also a lot more, like, it's a lot worse for some reason when the man is white and his partner is black.
Agree.
Whereas it seems to be more socially acceptable that I am white and my boyfriend is half black. And I don't know why, because there shouldn't be a difference.
Yeah.
But for some reason, it seems that like people treat me differently.
Yeah.
Like, and they're more okay with it.
So I feel like I don't want to like jump ahead too much because I don't know what we're going to talk about. Like, and I don't want to like just be like, let's go right to the middle of the book. But
You're
I
fine.
feel as though that's actually one of the themes of this book that I find the most interesting is the dichotomy of
Mm-hmm.
her relationship with Kevin, because he is a well-meaning person. He is in
Mm-hmm.
love with the black woman. He doesn't seem to be somebody who is domineering or
Mm-hmm.
devalues her because of her race or anything like that. But you come to realize, like, as the book goes on, that there's definitely an unspoken inequity between them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely something that, from him expecting her to like type up his pages because she was sleeping over his house, all the way up to, like when she vanishes for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
He grabs her arm and forces her to tell him what's going on. Like, his first reaction isn't, "Oh my god, babe, are you okay?" His reaction is
Yeah.
like, "I insist, I demand you tell me what happened," as though she
Mm-hmm.
has any idea. So, I think that part of the reason that people do act differently with a white woman and black man couple is because they look at the black man like he's won a prize, right? Because the
Mm-hmm.
ideal of beauty, the standard of beauty in this country is white, right?
Mm-hmm.
Arguably in the world, India has problems with having to, with whitewashing and people bleaching their
Mm-hmm.
skin. It's all across Africa and different, across the continent and different, in different countries. So it's not like it's just here. But
Mm-hmm.
I think when it's a black woman and a white man, at least in my experience, it's been kind of like either they make really terrible assumptions about, how you might be sexually, your sexual prowess, or
Mm-hmm.
they'll say something like it's all about worth, really. It's
Yeah.
all about worth. Like they're like, why would you have her when you could have like a beautiful blonde, leggy, slim, fair-skinned model? Like, wouldn't isn't
Yeah.
that what you would want instead? And the idea that someone, because Jason is a handsome guy for sure. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he's got sparkling blue eyes and all that, dimples, everything. So
Mm-hmm.
when people look at him, they're like, oh, okay, he's like a clean cut, like professional, like business minded guy. Why would he be with her? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
what do you have in common? Like, what is it that's drawing you to that person?
So, anyways, they're trying to keep someone named Kevin away from our main character. I'm just reading exactly what it says in my notes in case you're wondering, because I know who Kevin is now. But
Yes.
at the
Yes.
time when I wrote this note, I did not know who Kevin was. And then they're blaming him for the loss of her arm. And like, I'm a big fan of when they just kind of throw us into the action immediately.
Hmm.
Like, I don't want to know what's going on yet. I'll figure it out. But like,
Yeah.
when they're like, so, she teleports back in time and this is everything you need to know. That's boring. I don't want to know that
Hmm.
yet. I want to find out. So,
Yeah.
big fan of this prologue.
Yeah. High octane.
Huh. Yes. I love it.
I feel really bad when they think that he did something to her, though.
Yeah.
The second that they're like, did he do this to you? I was like, must be the boyfriend.
I know, but like, don't we all think that? Like,
Yes,
anytime you watch a true
absolutely.
crime movie, you're like, I don't even need to see the others. It's the
I
boyfriend.
mean, I wait to see if he's suspicious
Mm.
because sometimes he really is just very sorry and sad. But I think a lot of times, yeah, it's definitely
I judge it.
especially if you watch too much Law and Order SVU, then
Yeah,
it's always the spouse.
I judge it based off of if they cried yet.
Hmm.
Like, if we're at the very beginning and he's bawling his eyes out, I'm like, innocent man. But if we're
Yeah.
at the beginning and it's like he's trying to hold it together, I'm like, no.
Next.
Next.
Yeah, I definitely feel you there.
Yeah.
And I also like that so there's a lot that she keeps from the reader.
Mm-hmm.
And I too very much love that. Like, I love that it extends even past the prologue. Like, you get snippets of their relationship like
Mm-hmm.
as the book starts to go on. So you don't even find out like how they met until like the third chapter.
Which
You know
I
what I
like.
mean? Yeah, I really like that. I like that they kind of seed that information
Mm-hmm.
and you get to kind of discover it. I can't remember which page it is, but I feel like it's like a third of the way through the book before they even acknowledge that Kevin is white.
Yeah. No, definitely. It is. Because, like, to me, he was just like boyfriend blob. You know what I mean? I
Hmm.
didn't have really like an image for him. As he was just like, he was basically a circle and just Kevin scribbled over the top. That was all
Yep.
I knew about him. I was like, I don't know anything else. I'll figure it out later. So I kind of just like wasn't really envisioning him as a person yet. I was
Hmm.
just envisioning him as like little nameless blob or
Yeah.
named blob because I wasn't
Yeah.
sure what he looked like at all. Um, and fun fact, so I'm also reading Rebecca at the same time. And
Uh-huh.
I don't know how much you know about Rebecca, but the main character doesn't have a name in the entire book.
Really?
No descriptions really, except that like yeah, no descriptions actually. Instead of saying
Wow.
kind of yeah, no, nothing. She's nameless blob. And it's infuriating because I have to refer to her as the main character the entire time.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's interesting though. I like that as a mechanic.
It's
I'm sure that it's not great for the reader, but that's interesting for the
yeah.
writer, for the author.
It's interesting and it's not like anything I've ever read. So I am enjoying it.
Is that Daphne du Maurier?
Yeah,
Hmm. Tell me how it goes.
it's really good. I'm about to finish it. It's really good. Please read it and then because I don't want to spoil it, but
Okay.
all I'll say, I was right. Anyways, it's all that matters. Okay. So they're in the hospital. Everything's super hazy, which I do like getting her point of view of this is I like hospital scenes when we're like in the main character's eyes and it's like they get snippets of dialogue and then like they fall asleep. Snippets of
Mm-hmm.
dialogue fall asleep. I love that as a storytelling mechanic. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's so interesting because I hate when
Agree.
it's like I don't want to know everything. As I've said,
Yeah.
it's not
I
fun.
mean, I feel like it makes you feel a little bit more invested. Like
Hmm.
when you're handing me everything on a silver platter, like all I'm doing is kind of just imagining along with you.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? It's not you don't have as much agency as a reader because
Hmm.
you're just kind of like going along with the story.
Hmm.
But I feel like here she does a really great job of kind of helping you relive what Dana is going through,
Hmm.
which makes it that much more visceral. And I feel like the fact that she like drops that bomb in the beginning, right? Like, this last time I lost my arm, right? So you
Yeah.
know that like something crazy is going to happen. But then like the road, like the journey to that, like even, up through where we need to read tonight,
Hmm.
there's no resolution.
Yeah.
And that's, more than a third through the book, almost 50% through the book, I
Hmm.
think. So I really enjoy the fact that like all of this is piecemeal because she's like peeling back layers of complexity
Hmm.
almost. Like the more you find out, the more troublesome things start to get, like
Hmm.
Kevin's kind of a jerk at the beginning, And then you get the context of like, because you don't even know like when she is either. You know that she goes back in time, but even saying the year 1976, like you don't find that out until what many pages in as well. Like when they are, the fact that she's a Black woman, the fact that she is educated, all of these little pieces that like really change the scenes that she has in the past, start to kind of add up over time. And I'm really excited for us to talk about the rest of this book, because it really gets wild.
I will say I like that you said her name first, because in my head I was saying Dana, and Dana feels better because I was reading it as Dan with an A at the end.
Yeah.
That's what I'm familiar with.
So, I don't think that you are entirely wrong, because her full name is Edana or Edana.
Oh.
And I don't think it's Adana. I think it's Adana.
Oh.
But I do think for short it would be Dana, but I'm not sure.
I don't know.
Look at me.
It's one of them, maybe, unless someone throws us a curveball here. So, we are just going to keep pronouncing it however until someone tells me otherwise.
Awesome.
Welcome to the Barely Bookish podcast, okay? So, all we get to find out in this prologue is that our main character's arm was stuck in a wall, and that's how they lost it. And I was like, oh, awful. How could that even happen? Because that's why they're questioning Kevin so much, is because no one can really say what happened. And I think that's interesting, because it kind of gives you more insight into their relationship a little bit, because they're not questioning really him specifically. They're questioning him because he can't say what happened.
Right.
And I think that adds another like little layer onto this entire book. And I think it really sets us up for what this relationship's going to be like. Even if you don't really read into it too much, you're still like, oh, she has fully lost her arm, and they still let him in the room.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. And I think it's also, they kind of go into this a little bit too, is like looking at her like, why can't you tell us what happened to you either? And instead of just recognizing that this person is traumatized and giving them the room that they need to catch their breath and to heal, they kind of like start their investigation right away. Like it's almost breathless. You know what I mean? It's right away that they're, knocking on her, on her hospital room door, like, hey, you need to answer questions for us. And that kind of notion of just not being able to kind of take your time is something that I feel, Dana suffers from a lot. Like that's like this invasion of not necessarily privacy, but of like the quietude of her thoughts. You know what I mean? Like just being able to kind of exist. Like there's a lot of interruptions to this woman's life, both literally and figuratively.
I want her to just be able to catch her breath for like 5 minutes. Like she can't. She doesn't get a chance to this entire book, and I feel awful.
Yeah.
So then we are on to the next chapter, The River, which I did not catch on about these chapter titles until 2 chapters in, and we'll talk about it in a second. So we find out, they start setting the stage for us in this book, and they said it's June 9th, 1976. It's our main character's birthday, which is fun. Usually you get to have like a nice little day. She's just moving into this new house. They're unpacking. She's about to have her lovely fresh start. And then she's ripped out of this beautiful scenic moment and just teleported into a field where there's a drowning child. Like, first off, that is just 2 very different. It's not even that it's like different environments. It's such like a visceral difference.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh
yeah. Like not only is she just like there and then she's not on her end, and then there and then not there and then she appears on the other end, but like in addition to that, you've got this whole other like piece of the puzzle where she's going from something that is nurturing and setting up a home and calming, and she's like basking in the glow of with her husband and whatever, like she's building something for herself, and immediately is like ripped away to go and have to do something for someone else. Like that moment of hers that she has, that's like a lot, like we find out later on too, like a lot was kind of riding on that moment. The dating and courtship of these two individuals, like her and her husband, wasn't like the easiest thing in the world. Like they had some tumult there. So finding out, like in this first part, that like you have this moment where these two people are, you know, trying to build a life together, and then she gets like torn away the second that she finds that happiness. Like to me, that does not bode well.
Yeah.
For our main character.
No, it definitely does not.
No.
Yeah. And then just so you know, I've only read to the part that we're like finishing at. So I don't know anything past that about this book.
Okay.
So just throwing that in there. So if you happen to, like, I don't know anything, so I'm probably going to make a lot of assumptions towards the end because I don't know anything.
Do. Yeah.
I feel so bad for her. I really do.
Yeah.
So our main character, you know, sees a kid drowning and does what any good person does and goes and rescues this child. And then, you know, this woman comes up and's like, you killed my baby, and starts like beating her. And I'm like, excuse me, ma'am, why were you not watching your child first off?
Yeah.
Like, how did you even get in this situation in the first place?
Yeah, and I think that's really our first clue as to what's happening to her.
Yeah.
Because she immediately, like, she finds herself in the past and she immediately loses all of her autonomy, like right away. You know what I mean? She goes and rescues that kid because like that's what a good person would do. She doesn't think about it. She's not like, oh, maybe, you know, maybe I won't, or, you know, I'm just going to stroll by and pretend I don't hear him splashing and screaming his head off.
Yeah.
Like she immediately rescues him. And she even says, she's like, you know, he's a kid. Like I got to get him.
Yeah.
You know, everything in me told me to go and get this kid. So I went and got him. And then this woman immediately feels like entitled to hit her. I remember the first time I read it, I was just like, what kind of weird, twisted, bizarro land did this lady end up in? Where someone sees you rescuing their child and tries to beat you up. Like that's awful. But then when you get like when his father comes up and has that rifle pointed in her face, I was like, that was my first inkling. I was like, okay, so this, because they talk about, you know, what the mom looks like. And I'm like, okay, so a white woman comes up to this black lady who's rescuing her dying child. And she beats her up because she believes that she had ill will toward her son. And then someone has a gun. I immediately was like, uh-oh. You know, I was like, oh no. Oh, Dana.
Yeah.
What have you gotten into?
I was like, oh, these people are really sheltered. That was my thought. You know, I was like, okay, like this is not good. This is not like a good look.
Right.
But I didn't really fully like, again, I like glimpsed at the back. So I knew that we were like time traveling. So I was like, but I try and put that aside when you're reading. And I was like, okay, this is not a good look. This is not going to end well. Like, it is my first inkling that I was like, things are not going to go well for our main character here. This is not going to be the romanticized South as I have read it previously. This is things are not going to be good.
Yeah, this is going to be some real shit.
Yeah, which I already like better because I am very tired of consuming the media that like, oh, it wasn't that bad. Like, you know, things are not nearly as bad as we seem to think they are. And I'm tired of the storyline of, oh, the reason the South wanted to be separate was not just slavery. That's totally not, like, yes, it was.
Well, I think that what happens is people know that it's our national shame, right? So instead of facing it, you know, head on, people want to kind of sugarcoat it, because the way that someone tried to explain it to me once, when they were like, oh, it wasn't all about slavery, they were like, it was really about economy, you know, and economics. You got to look at the economic, you know, portion of what they were fighting for. And the states wanted, you know, their own freedoms and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, but time out. The economy that you're talking about is free labor, which brings it right back to slavery. Like, even if you want to talk about how it's about, you know, agriculture. Okay, well, the people that were picking and planting were slaves. So it's still about slavery. Okay, well, it was about freedom of choice, right? Because the North was trying to outlaw slavery. And the South was like, oh no, not on our watch. So it's still about slavery. Like, all these little pieces, sure, it was about more than slavery, but it wasn't about more than slavery. It was all about slavery. And then under that giant umbrella of slavery, there were all these other little pillars of reasons why the, you know, the Confederacy existed, you know? So I think that I also believe very strongly that a big part of the reason that American audiences, maybe audiences in general, don't have more accurate representations of slavery, it's kind of like when you have a book, right? That is a YA book, right? Like, let's say Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, right? That book if it were actually made the way that the book plays out, even though it's YA, even though it's a children's book, like that's a rated R movie.
Yeah.
Visualizing all of that, between the swears and then the blood and then the death and, the malice, and evil or whatever, like that's a rated R movie. So they have to dumb it down because seeing something is different than reading it.
Yeah.
And I think that like you really start to get down to the nitty gritty of what actually happened during slavery when you like, and again, a lot of times it stinks because people have to actually go and find this themselves, have to educate themselves. They can't just, trust that this is one of those things they're going to understand, passively through like our education system in this country. I mean, even school district to school district, you're going to get a different education on American history, particularly this time period. But I think that if people actually showed how bad it was, that it would be rated NC-17. I don't think that you could make like a rated R movie that actually depicted what it was actually like to go through something like this. And I think that like a lot of movies have gotten close. Like if you watch Roots, for example, like it's really long. It's, a very, very long movie. It's a miniseries. But in my opinion, highly worth it because it talks about slavery across generations rather than just like this snapshot, like 12 Years a Slave is kind of based on a slave narrative. Things like that you see, they're telling you a snapshot, but this, because it's a mini series, like you're seeing the whole span of this, of like a family and how that affected them and, all that stuff. And I also in college, like I had a minor in African New World Studies. So, and a major in English. So a lot of the classes I took also had me reading, obviously this book, but also like slave narratives and reading firsthand what people went through and how like your body just wasn't your own.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, whether you're male or female, or a child even, your body just wasn't your own. You belonged to somebody else and they could do whatever they wanted to you. That was like the first thing that I felt when I read that this lady started hitting her and this man had the gun in her face, was just like, okay, so then you don't belong to yourself wherever you are. It's okay for someone to like invade that personal space. And that's scary. Like that's terrifying.
Yeah. I knew the education system failed me when I had graduated college and I was doing social media planning and I was looking at all the holidays for the year, and I had to turn my coworker and ask if she had ever heard of a holiday called Juneteenth because I didn't know what it meant. And then she had to explain to me what it was. And in that moment, I was like, oh no.
Yeah. And it's hard because you see this bigger picture, right? That like we all live within. Like I know about Juneteenth. I've known about Juneteenth because again, my mom made sure that I was educated. But like the idea that like everyone can celebrate it now to me is wild. Like I think that that's great. At the same time, I'm like, we're also outlawing coursework in schools that would educate kids as to why we celebrate that holiday and why it's important and why it's necessary. So I think that, there's a lot missing. There's a lot to be desired in our educational system. And I feel like it's a history that, while embarrassing and, not sexy at all, you don't want to think of America as this, big, bad, garbage place. Like you want to be proud of your country. I think for the Black Americans that do know the history of this nation and slavery and all that, like the way I see it anyway is, I want to focus on how we've progressed and how we've made strides and how like something bad happened and it was an atrocity. It was near genocide, if not genocide, and is still kind of continuing to be a little bit of a genocide when you talk about police brutality and things like that, and voting, Rights Act, upheavals and things like that. So I don't know. I think it's important, I think, for people to educate themselves. And like, that's what I think is so great about this book, because it doesn't just kind of give you like an overview. Like it actually puts you right into that seat and makes you think about it in a real way rather than like, it happened to those people. Like even Dana, I feel like that's her perspective at the beginning of this is, it happened to those people in the, back in the day, not recognizing like the implications it still has for her as a modern woman.
Yeah, I think this is how I prefer to get my knowledge of the world, is because I have a hard time with textbooks because it always feels like it's a step away, and it's like, it's like statistics, where they're like, hey, this happens to like 90% of women, you need to be careful. I'm like, yeah, but it's not happening to me. And,
Right.
you know, and I know that's kind of terrible. And I try not to think that way. But it's still, there's like that part of you that's like, but it can't happen to me because those are just numbers on a paper. And it's like, I think the interesting thing about literature is that it forces you to be in that situation. And you're like, this could happen to someone I care about. This could happen to someone I know. And I think
Absolutely.
that this is, I've always been a proponent of making like schools have like I want to learn my history and learn things like this through fiction. I'm not like historical fiction, like a story is what I'm going
Mm-hmm.
for. And I think
Yeah.
that this is doing so far a really good job of like explaining the past to me in a way that I can understand.
Because you get that emotional element
Mm-hmm.
in there. And I think what I like about the book too is like it gets like, for lack of a better term, it gets a little meta.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I think as she starts recounting her experiences to this third party, which like isn't us, which like normally in a book, like the third party, you are the third party as the reader, right? Like the two people in the book are having a conversation. They already know the history of it and the backstory and all that stuff. And you either know or you don't, depending on what the author chose to show you. But because we've been with her the entire time, as she's explaining what happened to Kevin, as he's losing his patience and he's like drilling her hard about like, what
Kevin.
is it? Where were you? Yeah, he's the worst. when you know, when he's like insisting she tell him like everything, as the reader, you're like, back off, man.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh my gosh. I was like, I literally was reading this in bed one night and I was like, and Dana's like, what? I'm like, I just freaking hate Kevin. And he's like,
he's the
okay.
fucking worst. I love the little bits of shade that she gives you in the beginning though too. One of the things that really stuck out for me is when they talk about Dana and Kevin moving into their new place, right? And her unpacking. They very specific, like Octavia Butler makes it a point, an actual point to say that Kevin is only unpacking his things. Like she walks in and all his stuff is unpacked. He hasn't unpacked their things.
Yeah.
He hasn't like made their home nice. He has unpacked only his things. And I'm like, oh, okay, so that's how we're going to be then.
Yeah.
We're going to be that person. We're not going to like help and work together. You're going to only unpack your shit. And then she's going to be left to what? Organize the rest of your house?
Yeah. Back to our drowning child.
Yes.
We find out the kid's name is Rufus.
Yep. Terrible name.
Terrible name.
Yep.
Awful. Like, and she calls him Roof. And I was like, ooh.
That doesn't help me
no.
at all. Yeah.
It's almost worse. Like,
yeah. I like that he's a little ginger child.
Yeah, I have to talk about that too.
Yeah.
Is there a small plot line, and I don't know if you're thinking this too, are we thinking Tom is not Rufus's kid? Am I the only one thinking that?
So I also thought that momentarily, but then there's a scene later on where he gets mad, where Rufus gets mad at his mom.
Yeah.
And Dana describes for the first time that she could see how that's his son because they have the same like trash look on their face when they're talking to this lady.
Okay, but like his mom's annoying, so it's kind of justified.
Oh yeah, she's the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's the worst. Everyone is the worst, apparently. Anyone who's listening right now is like, so this is a garbage book about garbage people. No,
it's a great book about garbage people, okay?
About some garbage people. Yep.
Facts.
Main character though, not garbage.
Not garbage.
Just want to throw that
Only
out there.
one that's not garbage, to be fair.
Yes. Yeah, kind of.
It's okay. You know, we love that. So, as you mentioned before, she's straight up got a gun pointed to her face, and that's the moment that sends her back in time. So, as you kind of already started talking about, Kevin, as soon as she gets back, demands to know what happened. And she's like, listen, I guess I was like teleported somewhere. And Kevin's like, no. Even though he saw it happen, he's like, no, there's no way that happened. And I was like, oh, I hate Kevin. Like immediately on the hate train, I was like, absolutely not. Kevin, don't care about him. He can
thumbs down.
Yeah, I was like, he can get written off and die in the next chapter. I don't care. Let it.
Yeah. So to me, that is a big metaphor, like the way he treats her. And I think it starts like by the time we got to the end of the chapter that we had to read through, I think it became pretty obvious. But I feel like this is the first time that we really see this little glimpse of Kevin, that he is the kind of person who prioritizes his own like his own, not just his own personal comfort, but like his own reality, right? He prioritizes his reality. So like it takes her 2 pages, like 2 full pages, to get this man to chill out and hear her out and recognize that she doesn't know what happened and that she vanished. You know, she has to like start from the beginning, give him all that information. And like, you know, I don't know about your partner, but if I were to disappear in front of my partner all of a sudden out of nowhere one day, just magically, his first question isn't going to be like, I demand you tell me what happened. He's going to be like, are you okay? Do you need anything? Can I take you to the hospital? You seem really shaken. Why don't you go at your speed when you're ready and tell me what happened? Like he feels no sympathy for her.
Yeah.
He feels like she's like in on it somehow.
Yeah.
Like he makes wild accusations. And like, as he's saying this, like to me, the biggest thing that it reminded me of is a larger metaphor for the way that people are treated when they talk about racism. Racism to me is, and I mean, this goes for misogyny, it goes for homophobia, it goes for transphobia, right? Any kind of like Islamophobia, any kind of like racism, right? Anti-Asian hate, all of that. When you talk as a person on the receiving end of that, right? In my experience, when you talk about the racism that you've experienced, it's not always black and white. It's not always someone calling you a pejorative name to your face and being like, boom, ha, I'm racist. Like that's usually not how it goes. No one wants to admit that they're racist unless they're far gone, and then they're probably not going to be near you anyway. But like the people who are like secretly racist or have those feelings, it finds another way out of them, you know, usually through microaggressions or whatever. So for me, racism is like, it's almost like having like an invisibility cloak, because like even when people see it, even when they witness it, right, and you go, hey, that was racist, if the person is not someone who is used to understanding racism or thinking about racism, or is one of those people, it's just like, oh, but the world is just a better place and we're so much better than we used to be and whatever, as though, you know, better than you used to be still could mean terrible if you were trash to begin with. You know what I mean? So everything is relative. And I feel like when you experience racism, like it's hard to put your finger on what it is. You know what I mean? Like someone today told me that I was surprisingly eloquent. On its own, there's nothing wrong with that. Eloquence is a wonderful trait to have, right? That's I'm proud. Like it means I'm well educated. It means that I'm, you know what I mean? But like no one talks to Jason and says, "Oh, you're surprisingly eloquent."
Yeah.
Right? So I'm eloquent, and that's unusual and surprising to you because of how I look. And people don't realize that's what they're saying, but that's what they're saying. You know what I mean? So like it's like this weird intangible thing that happens to people, you know, and there's no way to articulate what it is. So she's like trying to articulate what happened to her, and he keeps interrupting her, and there's all these like stops and starts, and she's like trying to insist on what happened. Like if you think about, you know, Christine Blasey Ford's testimony during the Kavanaugh trial, right? You want to compare it to sexism. Like she's explaining why she knew that those guys were out to get her. She's explaining how she knew, how she felt, the smell in the air, the feeling, the emotions that went with it. And these people are looking at her like she's an idiot. What are you talking about? There's no proof. As though one needs proof when somebody is harassing you. Like you feel it.
Yeah.
You feel it. And that's essentially what she's saying to Kevin. Like, hey, I feel this. Like I feel this. This is what happened to me. I don't know what happened. I can't describe it. I can't put a name to it. I can't put my finger on what it is or why it happened. But this happened to me. And he basically doesn't believe her.
I know. And I just
like he's her person.
I know.
And he doesn't believe her.
Dude, I was like, in that moment, I was ready for her to leave him. I was like, I hate this man. Like, this man is one walking red flag, okay?
Yep. This is the story of a divorce.
I hope so. Because she keeps turning to him for comfort, but like, I don't like him at all.
Yeah.
Like, this dude, he may be with a black woman, he's racist. And I don't know if he knows that, but that's the vibe I get.
So I don't think that he does either.
Yeah.
And I think that we're going to see some more light shed on that when we continue to read.
Yeah.
Because like I feel like again, this book is like an onion, tons of layers. Like she starts peeling things back, and then she kind of shifts forward and backward in time, which is like a larger metaphor for what's happening to Dana. You know, the fact that we're going back in time in her life, in memory, and then actually back in time, like with her physical body. Like I love that that plot device.
Yes, me too.
But I think that like I don't know, I find it so interesting that all you're getting at first is just this one glimpse of the man that she's with, right? Or the man she chooses to be with. And you kind of make your assumptions. And then like that's juxtaposed by, you know, the next time that you kind of talk about Kevin with Dana, where she's remembering the first time they met and, you know, how they were together. And like that version of Kevin, I love.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was like, oh, he seems really into you. I mean, until obviously that one part of the drama that we'll discuss in a minute. But like for a minute I was like, oh, okay, so this man took a risk. Like he wanted to be with her. I imagine in 1976, like when interracial couples were still not really common at all.
Yeah.
You know, people were still getting prosecuted for that in some parts of the country. It was revolutionary, you know, and she probably thought, this guy has my back. Like, who would put themselves in this situation if they didn't know what they were getting into, you know?
I have some things to talk about when we get to that part of like their relationship, because I have a lot of comments. Like when they first started dating, lots of comments, but I'm gonna hold them. I'm gonna put a little pin in it because I will not forget it, and I'm gonna go on a small rant. So
I'm very excited.
Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. In this entire process, though, Kevin is fully trying to convince both of them that this didn't happen.
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Captain Gaslight.
Yeah. Kevin said, gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss. That's in this moment.
Yep.
And I hate it. I hate it so much.
Yeah.
So, okay. Then Dana's like, listen, I don't feel safe here. I don't feel comfortable. I am very scared. And Kevin in that moment was like, nah, dog, that won't happen again. And I'm like, my guy, how do you know? And Dana at the very same moment also was like, my guy, you don't know. No one knows.
Nope. But that's what I'm saying though. This is why I feel like it's a larger metaphor for racism, because again, like I can't tell you how many times that something racist will happen to me, and like never with Jason, because Jason sees it even when it's not there. Jason's like, I assume everyone's trash, and I'm like, calm down.
Love that for him.
Yeah, especially because he's so nice. Yeah, you know. But that's the weird part sometimes about like when you're experiencing racism, and like I say this as somebody like when I first met you, you know, I mean, people on this call probably, you know, who are listening to this call do not understand like how I met you, but the short version is you were my mentor, you were my mentee. I was your mentor at, you know, an advertising agency, and we spent the summer getting to know each other and we became friends. But you remember, like, you experienced racism. It wasn't towards you. Yeah. But you experienced racism, and when you tried to talk about it, you were gaslit. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, even though it wasn't racism that like was toward you, that you were like trying to take in or whatever, it was something that happened. I mean, none of you in your group were Black, but the thing that happened was so ridiculous and so offensive and so just abhorrent that you were like, I have to say something. But for a minute, like, no one knew what to say. Yeah. Because you're just so surprised and so shocked this is happening. You're just like, you freeze. You're like, what? And that's essentially what happens to Dana. Like, this happens to her and she freezes. She's like, what in the world is happening?
Please tell me we're thinking of the same event.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the video. Yeah. Somebody sent a not very nice video around that was extremely offensive. And none of the kids knew what to do. They were all just like, this is not something that's normal to me. This is not. And the person who sent the video was one of their fellow classmates, and he was like, this is normal for me. My dad sent it to me. And they were like, time out, what? Yeah. And he's like, oh, is this funny? Who? I don't understand. I still never saw the video. I was just told it existed because I think everyone knew better than to say anything to me, because listen, most of you don't know me in real life. And listen, I'll mess somebody up. I have no qualms about getting in a fist fight. And plus, you have a Black mentor. They're like, don't tell her. She's definitely going to tell the lady. Yeah. Don't tell Rachel. Yeah, she's going to say something.
Yep. I have no qualms about creating a scene. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the Barely Bookish podcast. If you want a little bit more content, please consider joining me over on Patreon. It's patreon.com/barelybookish. Every single month you get early access. Well, you get early access to every single episode. You also get an exclusive episode every single month. So it's also donation based, so it can be as low as $3 or as high as you kind of want it to be. per month, and then you get access to all that lovely content. You'll also be added to the Discord server, and that Discord server is just for Patreon members. I'm hoping to make it really fun and interactive, so I hope you all will consider joining. We also had to end this episode a little bit early just to separate things up, so Candace is not going to be joining us for this outro. So I did want to just say, check Candace out everywhere at Candace the Magnificent. They've got a lovely YouTube channel where they review ice cream. They're on quite a few different shows, and I will be linking those in the bio as well. They've done a lot of cool things, so make sure to check out Candace. You can find them over on Twitch, on Twitter, over on Instagram, a whole bunch of cool places. You will get to hear from Candace in the outro like normal soon. It's just that this episode had to be separated out a little bit, so next week you will definitely be able to hear Candace. So yeah. We are also talking about The Prison Healer in the Barely Book Club, so if you want to talk about books with a lot of very cool people, please consider joining the Barely Book Club. It's a delight. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of great people in there, so I would love to see you all there. Also, I am streaming more on Twitch now. I just started streaming Hades, the video game, which has been a lot of fun, but I'm hopefully going to be streaming a lot more stuff soon, so make sure to follow over on twitch.tv/barelybookish to become a part of that. For the next couple recordings, like I mentioned, make sure you've read through the end of the fall. This book is honestly probably going to take us a while to get through, so I anticipate probably somewhere around 8 episodes maybe, but we will see as we go along. But I hope you all enjoy it, and I'll catch you all next week. Our theme song was created by Raphael Crux. Our logo was designed by my little sibling Sarah, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye!